Hi, friends. Emily Bingham here. Welcome to the Death and Disco podcast, as well as the Sun and Sober Living podcast, Mary's podcast. Today, we're kind of doing something extra special, a little different, because she and I are both going to be sharing this recording on our podcast because I really want you guys to get to know Mary. And I think she wants to introduce me to your community as well. So this will be a fun conversation around the power of retreats and the power of awe, both two kind of overlooked tools, it seems, in the world of healing and growth, but have been instrumental in both of our lives. So welcome, Mary, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad that we're doing this because I feel like from the moment we connected, it was like, we need to collaborate. We need to find a way to bring our communities together. So,
yes, amen. I totally agree. So, just a little backstory. Mary and I did meet at a local networking group here in Denver. Shout out to the Nova for soul-led entrepreneurs, mainly women in that space. But we met at a beautiful dinner party that the founder of that group was having, and we just immediately connected around we both have been through losses. So we immediately felt connected through grief, as anyone who has lost someone who they love does. You know, it's like you just have that visceral connection to someone through loss, as well as our love for retreats and for awe. You know, Mary and I we got coffee shortly after that meeting, and we were like, okay, how do we collaborate? Let's run a retreat, because I creeped Mary's Instagram page after that meeting and saw all of these amazing retreats that she hosts across the world. And I was like, oh my God, I want to go on one of these. And then I was like, wait, why don't we just host one together? And we immediately felt drawn to this concept of awe. And I don't know, Mary, do you want to dive into that a little bit or?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say I remember meeting you so well and sitting down at the dinner table because I remember there was some sort of question prompt that was inviting us to bring a little bit more depth into the dinner conversation. And I think it was about something that you've overcome to get where you are.
That's right.
And I just remember I your story and what you've been through. And also seeing that you had this incredible spark and just so much, I could tell that you hadn't lost the sense of awe and wonder and love of life. And that to me is something I've just been really fascinated by and interested in since, beginning with my addiction recovery journey and then more recently experiencing grief. It's how do we, knowing that we're all going to experience really hard things, how do we continue to hold space for joy and wonder? And, you had that so intensely that I was I need to know more about this girl and how she's managed to move through what she's been through. And so I think just discovering that such a big part of both of our lives is going to actively seek out. It's not just about waiting for the magical things to happen. It's no, this is going to be a priority in my life. And then, so I love having this conversation. And it's I love hearing your perspective on it and how our experiences overlap. So I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I guess we'll get more into awe later because we'll get more into awe later because I think it would be important to just hear more about your story and what kind of brought you to this moment in time and who you are now. And let's go back to the prompt at dinner. What did you have to overcome in order to be who you are today?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep this brief because I feel like I could go in a million different directions, but I struggled with addiction beginning in my late teenage years and into my 20s. And, I had been to treatment multiple times. And I it took me a long time to accept the fact that that I wasn't going to be able to drink and use drugs and party and do all of the things that I had gotten so used to in my life. And, there was actually, and I know we talked about this at dinner, there was a major grief in that stage of my life of letting go of this person, this party girl that, went out in the city and to all these networking events, and I was working in digital advertising. And so I was in this huge transition period of my life when I did go to treatment. And, I immediately after that, I did my first yoga teacher training. And so, I'm in this transition period and I'm starting to realize that, digital advertising and the lifestyle that I was living and the work hard, party hard lifestyle was just not really for me in this new chapter of my life when I was sober. And during that time, a friend of mine came to visit from Denver and she told me she was going on a backpacking trip to Southeast Asia. And I knew nothing about that part of the world. Like, I could not point Thailand on the map to you at that time, but something like deep in me was just like, I need to go, like I need to leave my job, take a break, connect with myself. And anyway, fast forward, I waited. I was smart about it. I saved up some money, had someone sublease my apartment, started traveling. And during that process, I just became like absolutely in love with spending time in nature. I went on my first yoga retreat as a guest in Cambodia. This was in
Wow.
2014. And I fell so in love with this retreat model, which was, we were living in grass huts in the countryside in the jungle. You'd lock your phone away. There was no Wi-Fi. It was super like simple living, connected to nature.
Mm.
And I actually had the opportunity to teach yoga as a guest at that retreat center because the manager found out that I had just been certified. And I remember in that moment, it was like, I think we all have those times where like life can feel so uncertain and sometimes trying to plan for the future is just like so stressful and overwhelming. But like in that moment, I was like, I am meant to be here. Like, I was like, I need to find a way to stay. And so I ended up, getting an opportunity to stay and teach and work at that retreat center. And that was really like such a huge transition period in my life of just feeling this like deep connection to nature and presence and really understanding the value of community and connecting with people who you can be vulnerable with, who you can be real with, who you don't need to have a drink in your hand in order to feel confident in
Yeah.
front of. And that was like a huge life-changing shift for me. So anyway, to answer the question, I feel like, my life was from that point on, like I've been really, really passionate about healing, recovery, teaching yoga, like sharing practices that support mind body connection. Somatic experiencing is part of my work now. But in order to get to that place, like overcoming addiction was a huge part of that journey and really freeing myself from the story that I needed alcohol or drugs or, whatever it was in order to live an enjoyable life or in order to overcome challenging situations. And, connecting it to this topic of awe, like when I no longer was living in this way, I've heard addiction described. There's a Buddhist teacher, Vimalasara. She said, addiction is an unwillingness to meet life as it is. And that is something that I realized I was constantly trying to alter my experience.
Hmm.
And awe allowed me to really open up to the joy and the wonder despite challenging moments. And just see the beauty that was already in front of me. Like I didn't need
Yeah.
to add or enhance something to my life.
Mm.
So,
Man, that's really powerful. And I really think like all of us are addicted to something. I read the book Dopamine Nation, and that really opened my eyes to the world of addiction and how just like cell phones are an addiction, chocolate is an addiction, like anything that takes us out of that present moment. And I really like I like what you said about like really just like any desire or like outcome that we're working toward is kind of a form of taking us out of the present and not being with what truly is. And there's just medicine and recognizing that too.
oh my gosh, it's so true. And I'm so glad you bring that up, like the whole concept with Dopamine Nation. It's like, that's the thing. I think that we live in a world where it is so hard to actually be present with
Hmm.
how you feel and like the language of our own body and our nervous system. I was just reading this beautiful book called Heartwood by Lindsay Branham. And she talks a lot about like how, in order to connect with nature, like this kinship of the earth and other people, it starts with really like listening to our own experience and like relearning this language of our body. And I think so many of us are like so hyperstimulated, so distracted. We're if you think about social media, like we're constantly being bombarded with what we should be doing, what we should want. And it's so hard to like actually tap into like our truest self and, who we are and what we're meant to bring into the world. And, I bring up that book because her perspective was so valuable because it's like we're in this really horrible situation where our disconnection to nature is not only, it's like it's creating so much harm, so much disconnection. But if we can just start by like coming back to ourselves and slowing down and being more present, like that's when we get back into this like interconnected state, which we really need to return to right now for so many reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I found myself in a similar situation, and I'll go into the story of my loss in a moment. But like 4 years after my husband's death, I found myself in this pattern of just like hustle, proving, earning, impact, success, clients, social media followers. And it was just this like vicious cycle where I kept like hitting all of these achievements that I thought I needed in order to make me feel happy or worthy. Right? Because really, like, that's how our society has programmed us. We're not taught how to be with ourselves and how to source gratitude and wholeness from within. It's very much all about external. It's all externalized if, growing up in Western society, right? And I would say like the past 2 years of my healing journey have really been about coming back into my body to be present with my internal world and really like waking up to the awe and the magic that is already right here and recognizing that it's not an outside job. Happiness isn't an outside job. It's an inside job.
Absolutely.
And I really I'm wondering if you can even share a little bit about the somatic work that you do in terms of, and maybe I'll just share a little bit of my story, because I think it does happen at a very like body level. I remember when I first started trying to slow down and to take a pause from my computer to just either go to a coaching session, to meditate, to do a walk in nature, my nervous system I would feel anxiety in my chest because it just wasn't used to it. And I had this loop, and maybe you can explain more about what's happening more like neurologically or somatically here, but it was like I didn't feel safe to slow down because I felt like I needed to be putting content out or putting another email out or something in order to like get the follow, get the client, get the money, right? And it took a while for me somatically to come back into my body and to remind myself that I was safe and okay. And so I just I'm curious as to like what's some of the work that you do around that, and how does that show up with addiction as well?
Yeah, this is such a powerful example. And I also want you to actually, for people that might be listening, I'm sure a lot of the people who listen to your podcast know your story, but for anyone who's listening who doesn't, I feel like it'd be really, really helpful for you to
share right now.
Give the full backstory, because I think I'll just say quickly, like, this is such a powerful example because on a surface level, it would be easy for someone to say, why do you care so much about your follower count? Who cares? It's just social media. But when you understand your story and the trauma that you've been through and that you're in an survival mode as suddenly being thrust into being a single parent while, also holding the incredible grief, which is so impactful, of losing your husband. And so, you're in survival mode. Like that chasing is, and we've been conditioned with a story that we need these things in order to survive. And I think it also goes back to like the whole conversation around like connection and belonging, because we've been brought up in this individualistic culture that's like, we have to, it's like every man for themselves. You got to chase to get ahead, and you are alone, and it does feel competitive. Like we've been conditioned to believe that these are the things you need to do to survive. So it's like, it's getting to that underlying root cause of like, okay, there's serious, the dysregulation, and how do I create a felt sense of safety in my body? Because, anyway, I'd love to before I say anything else, like for you to go back and give the backstory of that.
I know, we're like,
Such
yeah, just, the order of this has been hard for us to nail down. But okay, so on March 26th of 2019, which is literally 7 years from like yesterday, I celebrated my late husband's death anniversary. My husband passed away from cancer. He was 32 years old, and he left me as a solo mom of a 1 and a 3-year-old. Now, for anyone who's dealt with cancer, your grief journey doesn't begin when when the person dies. It begins with their diagnosis. And Ian was actually diagnosed with cancer like fresh out of college. We were college sweethearts. And we actually decided to take a break after graduation for him to go explore his career path and for me to explore mine. Ironically, he got diagnosed with cancer when we were on a break, and that's what brought us back together. I think subconsciously we were both like, because we both were in denial. We were like, you're not actually going to die. Like, there's no way. Like, people beat cancer all the time. There's no way you're perfectly healthy or like 24-year-old, I think at the time. There's no way that this could happen. So just to keep this shorter, we ended up getting back together. We ended up getting married. We ended up having our first kid, Isabel. And shortly after I was pregnant with my second, we discovered that his cancer had metastasized and it was terminal. It was uveal melanoma. There was really no cure for it. Of course, the oncologist kind of told us otherwise. And that's a whole nother conversation too, around just like painting this optimistic picture when the odds are kind of against you with a lot of these diagnoses. I think he had like a 10% chance of beating it. But yeah, he passed away after a 15-month battle with cancer, and it completely shattered everything about my life. It shattered the future that I thought I would have with him. It shattered my identity as a wife, as a mother. I had to grieve all of those roles. It shattered my understanding of life. I mean, I never imagined that I would be in that situation. And I guess, to speak to this like survival pattern, I completely dissociated at the time. And it's so weird because this was over a period of 15 months where, he got after his cancer metastasized, it was like, okay, we're gonna fight this. But it's like it's happening in reality, but it's like it's taken me 7 years, like literally 7 years, to actually come to terms with the fact that this horrible thing happened in my life. And it's weird because in hindsight, it like felt very real, but I haven't been able to process it. Like my body and my heart hasn't been able to fully process it until now. And I'm sure I'm not naive to think that this is the end, right? Like grief it's not linear. It comes in layers and it's circular and we go deeper with it. But what I will say is that those early months of grief were really incredibly hard. I was absolutely in survival mode. I didn't want to be a mom. Because I was like, I don't want to do this alone. Like we created this whole life together and then my person was gone. And so I had to be really honest with the way I was feeling. I got help early on. My parents helped out a lot. They took the kids because the only thing that I found relief in was writing about my grief, sharing it online, and working out. Physical activity was like number one. And so the combination of those things kind of all came together because I was looking at my life and asking, what the fuck am I going to do? Right? Like, I don't want to go back to my 9-to-5 corporate job. That feels completely meaningless for me. So I hired a coach. Her name is Jackie Carr. She's amazing. She lives out here in Denver too. She loves the nature. All about the shout outs, right? But I said I wanted to do something with grief and physical fitness because those were the only things that like felt good to me at the time. And so I came up with the concept of Move Through. And what that was in the beginning was I was also a spin teacher at the time. I invited my clients in, people who had also experienced a loss. Because, once you start to share about your story, people come out of the woodwork because it's such a permission slip. It's like, oh, like my mom died too, or my brother died, or my fiance, whomever it was. Like, we don't talk about grief. I mean, it's getting better, but I think that once you start to open up about your loss, it gives people permission to open up about theirs. And so what I did is I invited grievers into a dark spin room, and I would curate a playlist based on a certain emotion that we wanted to move through, whether it was anger, whether it was anxiety, or just grief, which was like really slow. And I would create movements on the bike and kind of like a story arc to just help people feel their emotions. And it was beautiful because you didn't have to talk about it. You just let the music move you, and you could feel the power of just being in a room with other people who were going through it too. And we all just released our emotions together. And that was it. But then COVID hit. And so I couldn't host these things inside the studio anymore. And so I decided to take my whole business online, and I created like a Move Through Grief online course, which was all about, physical movements to move through different emotions experienced in grief. And I also started sharing my story on TikTok and on Instagram. And I didn't have any intention of it blowing up, but it did. Like, I grew a community. I think on TikTok, I grew to like 100,000 followers within like a year. And it just kept compounding after that. I got TV appearances on Good Morning America. Was asked to be like on The Bachelorette. Like, all of these insane things started to happen.
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, like from my husband's death. And so it was like this lifeline that I really needed at the time. It was incredibly healing, and it allowed me to alchemize my pain and turn it into purpose by helping other grievers heal. It connected me to a community of widows, young widows that like I didn't have here in Denver. I didn't know anyone within my friend group who had been through what I had. So it connected me to widows globally who could see me in my story, and I could see them in mine, and we like were able to witness each other. So there was all of these like beautiful things that came from that for sure. And I believe that like anything in life, there's a shadow and a light. There's light and shadow, right? It's a both and. So those were all the beautiful things that came from Move Through and my business. But then on the negative side, like I did kind of bypass a lot of the pain. And I've had to recently go back and be with that, to go re-experience those early months of grief and the months that Ian was dying, because at the time it was like grief kind of gets frozen, right? And with time, as our body feels safe and we're able to go there, like it starts to thaw and we can feel it more and more. But yeah, I was definitely in survival mode. And, I think when we have wounds like this, it's not just one that might be feeding that loop of go, go, go. Like, I also uncovered a deep wound of like unworthiness where I had just externalized all of my worth into performance and doing and achieving. So it was a lot of different things that got me into that pattern. But, what a privilege it's been to heal those wounds and to cultivate that sense of wholeness within myself. And I don't think I ever would have had my husband not passed away. And it's definitely not a trade-off. But I truly believe that all of any hardship that we go through in life is ultimately happening for us, even if it doesn't seem like that at the time.
Yeah.
So that was a long-winded answer to your question.
No, I'm so glad that there was so much that came up for me while you were sharing. But I think that, when it comes to grief, it's interesting how, like you're saying now, that's one thing I think people don't really fully appreciate or understand about grief is that 7 years later, you're now starting to process and feel it. And something that I find is so incredible and interesting about our nervous system is I feel like in a way, we could look back and realize, oh, I was so like dissociated in those first years, or, moving through life in this sort of like functional freeze where like you're so like you're not really feeling it, but you're still going through all these motions. But I just think about how our nervous system is so protective. Like if we can think about the fact that like how could you feel all of that and be, sometimes we shame ourselves for like there are these phrases that go around like feel it to heal it. And you've got to feel it to heal it. And sometimes it's like,
You-
if you really were feeling all of that in that
yeah.
moment, like I think about like with grief, it's like that could have like, in a way, like how amazing that our systems protect us from feeling like the full immensity of that. Because how could you survive?
Yeah. Well, it's so true. And it's the same like with inner child healing work, right? It's like we don't want to shame those parts. We don't want to make them wrong because protection is a form of love, right?
Yeah,
Like the little girl who shrinks because she feels like she's too much. And instead of like, we try to like resist ourselves and like push those parts away or like I remember I've had a heart wall, which the heart, it is a layer of protection. And at some point it does feel like persecution, but it's like, though you don't go in by blowing up the wall. Like TNT is
right.
never a good strategy. You go in by like making peace with the wall and understanding like why it's there and slowly allowing it to dissolve as you feel safe and ready for that. And like I I agree with you so much on like the releasing of the shame and really seeing those parts as like necessary for us to survive.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I think too, it's so amazing to hear the role that movement played in your experience because that's the thing too. I think about like when something like so traumatic happens that just like rocks our world and can just like so easily put us into that like total shutdown or, like
Yeah.
to have something that brings that feeling of aliveness
Mhm.
back.
Mhm.
And, one of the things that we talked about in our workshop of like one of the wonders of life that evokes this sense of awe is collective effervescence. And I
Mhm.
remember as that conversation was going, I just saw your face on the screen, like lighting up so much because it's like when we're moving our bodies in connection with other people, like a spin class, like I just such a strong, I can like feel it in my body, all of you doing that class together.
Yeah.
It creates this sense of connection and belonging. And through that, we feel so held and supported.
Yeah.
And, when we go through something that's so hard, it can be so isolating. Like, I think the experience of grief, especially like what you've experienced, like being such a young widow, and you mentioned like you didn't have friends that were there to support you through that. But to go and like be in connection with other people and not have to feel isolated. Like, I just love that
Yeah.
you are able to create that for yourself, but also like bring that to your community.
Yeah, it all felt just very organic at the time, and what's coming through for me and how I think where I want to take this with you is words can only do so much, right? Like I was in talk therapy for a really long time and it was great and it served its role, and at a certain point it's like skin to skin, heartbeat to heartbeat, like moving with the group and feeling it. And I've also I would say that a lot of healing has also come by healing through like metaphor and actual real experiences. Like for example,
Mhm.
I took my widows on a retreat to Mexico in Tulum and for Dia de los Muertos, which was amazing because we did all of this work around Day of the Dead and connecting to our loved ones. But we also did a Temazcal ceremony, which was about like, you go into a sweat lodge and you're like releasing through like all the toxins from your body, but also metaphorically, like what are you releasing? And so, like I released a lot of like fear on that retreat. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because both you and I have found a lot of healing and solace and community and growth in retreats. So I was wondering if maybe, I mean, obviously with your story of Cambodia and how you got into it, but how have retreats played a role in your journey and how have you gotten into guiding others on them?
Before I answer your question, what you said about like going beyond the words, this is what really has drawn me to like the somatic approach to healing because it was first in my own lived experience. Like I remember alongside going to treatment for addiction, I started practicing yoga and I had been to treatment once before. That was actually when yoga first started like doing its work in the background. It took some time. But what I realized is when I actually got sober, it was because I was showing up on my mat every single day and I was connecting to my body and I was
Mm.
connecting to my breath. And at the time, I remember I would go to yoga when I was younger and I would hear all this like yoga teachers speak and think it was really woo woo and like I was kind of skeptical about the whole thing, but when it came to my addiction, I was like there is no denying that this practice is literally freeing me from these patterns that have felt like they had such a strong hold on me. Like something is happening here. And that's when I
Yeah.
went on this
Yeah.
like huge exploration of like, how is this working? I ended up finding one of my first teachers that took a more like body-based approach to addiction recovery, who was Nikki Myers, who founded Yoga 12-Step Recovery. And she was a somatic experiencing practitioner. And so she really spoke the language of the body. And I realized that, my first go at addiction recovery, it was a lot of like the cognitive and spiritual tools of recovery, but we weren't working with our body. And there's a somatic practitioner that I love. Her name is Sarah Baldwin. She educates on the nervous system so well, but she talks about how our nervous system is a show, not tell system.
Mhm.
So it's one thing to say, Emily, you're fine. You're going to be okay. Don't worry. If anyone knows what it feels like to be told, like, just calm down, that's not going to change the fact that, like, internally, you feel you're in like complete survival mode, and that's a whole physiological experience. And so what I realized was that like it wasn't enough to just like I find that like talk therapy and processing and all of these things are so beneficial and they've helped me a lot.
Yeah.
But there's also, we can't deny the fact that we are like a deeply interconnected being that is not just a
Yes.
head on top of a body. And so I realized in order to like get to the underlying causes, I needed to address what was going on beneath the surface. The fact that um, I did have a dysregulated nervous system. And when I was really anxious and overwhelmed, like I had this habit of reaching for something outside of myself. So,
Mhm.
that feeling is still going to be there. How can I shift the internal state so that, impulse to like grab a drink or do something to shift it
Yeah.
is not so strong and doesn't have such a power over me. And so, getting into like why it was that retreats had such a big impact on me, I realized when I got to that community in Cambodia where I ended up living for a full year teaching retreats, it was like all of these components came together that was lacking in my life. So, first of all, I was spending my days in Chicago, waking up in a city apartment, you know, pumping myself with caffeine. I was usually hungover. I'd get right on the train. I'd get into a high-rise building, sit in front of Excel spreadsheets all day, more caffeine, more stress. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, I just need a drink, and I would go straight into like drinking it off and then not get a good night's sleep. And so, my lifestyle, like all the conditions changed
Yeah.
dramatically. In Cambodia, I was waking up going straight into my personal practice of yoga and meditation. We had chanting there sometimes. I was eating nourishing foods. The sounds like of nature were all around me. We were so connected to the earth there. There was, movement practice. There was Dharma talks.
Yeah.
You know, there were just so many things that were helping to regulate my nervous system. And so, like, it was sort of like freeing me from all of these things that I felt like were beyond my control.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times we just aren't realizing that all of these stressors that are compounding in our everyday life, diving straight into our phone first thing in the morning,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden it's like, that's one thing. And then, not taking the time to connect to ourselves and all of the like hyperstimulation, all of these stressors that we were never really designed for.
Right, totally. It makes me think of the book, Willpower Doesn't Work, and I'm spacing out on I think it's Dan Harris. Okay, don't quote me on that, but it's Willpower Doesn't Work. And he talks about how, for any type of change to take place in our lives, any behavior change, it really is about our environment.
Um,
And, and creating an environment that sets us up for success instead of failure. And so if you're trying to break your social media addiction and you have your phone next to your bed, it's going to be really hard to just rely on willpower not to like look at it. So yeah, I totally agree. I think that retreats provide this like reset where you can go, and whether it's not having any phones or just being surrounded by nature or being immersed in conversation or in ceremony that really invites you to connect inward or with other people around you, like it can break that loop that we get kind of stuck in our normal day-to-day lives. And I think there's also a term for this called peak experiences. He talks about it in the book as well, where it's like we just and a peak experience can happen at a retreat, but it can also happen just going on a hike for like a day. But like it's really like breaking that cycle, breaking the routine and going out and creating space within your mind for something like an epiphany or for like a new idea, more like creativity to kind of come through to see your life from a different angle. And I guess this is also where experiences of awe come in as well. I think that peak experiences are related to awe in a way. So do we want to talk a little bit about that right now or?
Yeah. And I just to add one thing, because I'm glad that you bring this up because, it's funny, like my answer to people who are struggling with addiction would not be like, oh, leave your job, leave your city, go move out to the countryside of Cambodia, lock your phone away. And I remember at one point, somebody close to me came to visit and they said I'd been there for a full year in this for anyone who's been through addiction before, there's real value sometimes in going away to like an inpatient treatment and so for me, like that change of environment was beneficial. I'm not saying that it's necessary. And at one point, someone said to me, like, it's okay, like you can come back now. Like, I think you're okay. And I was like, whoa, like it made me think, are you interpreting this as me like kind of escaping and hiding away? And I was like, am I? I had to ask
Yeah.
myself that question. Like, I'm in this really safe, protected environment. And I think the point is we're never going to be able to create these perfect conditions,
Right.
where you wake up to the sound of roosters and then you make your way into the yogashala. And then after that, you go for this delicious meal prepared, like in an ideal world, we'd all be living on a retreat, right? And I'm sure we wouldn't have a lot of the things that we struggle with, but that's so not reality. But having that experience was such an obvious, like it highlighted everything that was causing so many problems in my life. So
Yes.
like when I left that environment and went back to like quote unquote normal, whatever that is, I was able to say like, okay, what do I actually still have control of? Because I'm not going to lock my phone away permanently in a locker, but like you said, like, could I plug it in the other room so that my first instinct when I wake up is not to like dive straight into it? Or, can I be really intentional about just being a little bit more in nature? Because I know that like hearing those sounds and, looking at expansive views has such a profound effect on my nervous system. So I think that like that's the value of retreats. It's like, we go or any peak experience, like we have this big awakening moment
Mhm.
and then we see what's realistic. Like where can we weave little pieces of that in?
I'm so glad you named that. And it's funny because in grief or in early on in my grief journey, like I had this thought where I was like, I just need to escape. Like I was like, I just need to get out of here. Like I was secretly hoping to get on The Bachelorette so I could like leave my family for 8 weeks, which sounds horrible. But I was like, I just don't want to be in my life. I don't want this to be my reality, right? So I was looking for that escape. And I did go on a retreat, maybe not so much with the intention of escaping. It was more just like that break. But you're right. Like you can never escape your life like forever. And I think if anything now when I go on retreats, it really is with the intention of like creating a container for me to step outside of my day to day, to get a little breathing room, to connect back to myself where I can silence all of the distractions and really listen to myself and, connect to the divine, connect to other people around me. Like there's been so many times where just the people on the retreat also inspire something within me or awaken something within me that I never would have thought about before. And then it's like it's just like creating that reset so that you have and having like new tools. Like I went on a retreat where we did a morning practice every morning before we drank coffee and I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Like I cannot.
I'm a big coffee girl too, so those experiences challenge me.
It was so good. Like, and she taught us how to do like a sacred start, like by like creating an altar, and they gave us ideas for like how to journal and how to listen to music and light Palo Santo, and like it was like I could have listened to I don't know, like I could have listened to a podcast about that, like we are right now. But I don't think I ever would have done it. Like, had I not had the experience and allowed it to actually change me and feel what that was like, I probably wouldn't have brought it home with me as a tool that I now use every single day.
Totally, because you had a felt sense experience of it
Yes.
in your body. Like,
Yes,
your body
exactly.
knows that feels like it wants more of that, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, totally.
And I'm so glad you brought up the people in the group too, because that was another thing for me. I remember when I first went as a guest of this retreat, I was still so young, but I felt like, oh my gosh, I had this whole career in digital advertising and I was realizing like I can't really continue to work in this way because for me in recovery, like alcohol is so part of the lifestyle that I had built
Mhm.
there. And I just didn't feel that connected to it anymore. And I was like, oh my gosh, like my whole life is over. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do for work. And then I would sit next to someone at dinner and they were like, in their mid 50s. And they were like, yeah, I've been a lawyer my whole life, but I'm just kind of trying to figure out what I want to do, like what I want to do for work. And I'm like, okay, this is so inspiring because I was literally in my early 20s feeling like this, like everything has fallen apart and I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. And now I have someone who's just like completely shifted my perspective, who is
Yeah.
like, so at ease with the fact that like there's still so much life. I have so much time to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think we can, when we're in the same environment and we're surrounded by the same people with the same belief system,
Mhm.
and we have this identity that like we're not only stuck in, but is kind of being reinforced by the people around us, it's really hard to like break out of that,
Totally.
But when
Yeah,
you can like, yeah, shift and have people that like open your mind to see the world differently,
totally.
I think it can be life changing.
Totally. So this is where I think we should talk about awe because I think it's that you just nailed it right there. It's the perspective shift. And so Mary and I just ran a workshop called Awakening Awe. We'll link it in the show notes if you want to sign up and get a recording of it. But awe is basically when you come into an experience that's so vast that it reshapes your understanding of life. That is at least Dacher Keltner's right his definition of it, and he is a Berkeley psychologist who's been studying awe. It's like his legacy, his life's passion. Like he just wrote a book on it, and basically, experiences of awe at a physiological level can be felt by signs of like the goosebumps or when the hairs on your skin kind of like stand up. And then it can be like, ooh, ah, like, wow, right? And Mary and I have both had our own unique experiences of awe and that have really helped us get through hard times. But we also now both seek it just to add more meaning and magic to our life. So, Mary, can you just share a little bit, like Cliff Notes version of your story of awe, and or when you first encountered it, and how it really supported you during a tough time in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that we both have like, we both live in Colorado, but we both have these stories of encounters at the mountains because I
Yes.
think that that can be like, I just find the mountains to be so powerful and still experience awe daily. But when I went on that trip that I mentioned, when I was in this big transition phase, I had gone from, being in the city of Chicago to suddenly being immersed in nature constantly. I was backpacking through various parts of Southeast Asia. And through that journey, one of the friends that I was on put out the idea of trekking the Annapurna circuit in the Himalayas, which I was so wildly unprepared for physically. Like it's laughable right now. And truly I was actually in a lot of pain. Like my knees were really, really starting to ache. And by like the third day, I was like questioning if I was actually physically going to be able to do this. But I remember it was like I would have these moments where I would like feel the pain in my legs, and these lines from recovery would like come to me like just one step at a time. I was like keeping myself really present, but I would look up at these mountains that were like have been around for like millions of years, and just I often reference Robert McFarlane refers to the human instant. He talks about this concept of deep time, which is like when we think about like glaciers forming and mountains, like humans are just like the tiniest flash of existence. And then my individual human experience and like this pain that I'm feeling in my leg, like it's all felt so small and insignificant that it almost became laughable. And
Mhm,
it's one of those
mhm.
things that someone couldn't have just told me. And I'll, expanding beyond like just that moment and physically feeling tired or whatever it was. Like in my addiction and, in the early phases of recovery, like I was so caught up in the shame and, the struggle and my own, little world and the stresses of work. Like I'd be in my cubicle and it would feel like the world is falling apart because, I was something with a work deadline, it's like, that literally feels like the biggest thing ever. And so all of a sudden it was like, all of that stuff just felt so laughable. I'm like,
Yeah.
I am literally like wasting this flash of human existence in this like epic, beautiful world over worrying about things that really don't matter,
That's so
And
can we
someone
just, like,
couldn't have just
say that
told me that.
again? That this flash of human
Yeah.
experience worrying about things that don't matter? Like, how true is that?
Yeah. And it's like if someone just said that to me when I'm like super anxious and overwhelmed, like it wouldn't have meant anything. But to
Right.
have that moment of awe, like, and
Totally.
like you said, one of the effects of awe is that it disrupts our current mental models. Like
Right.
it literally blows our mind. And so it was like I was actually feeling this experience where I'm like laughing at myself. Like, gosh, like life is so short. And the
Yeah.
things that I have given so much attention to, not to minimize, I would never want to minimize like the struggle of addiction and mental health challenges. Like it's so real. And it's not something that we can just like look at a mountain and flash our way out of. But
Right.
that moment really helped put things in perspective for me,
Oh,
And I think that like we have these moments where we kind of wake up and have these realizations like in awe, like, it's like that moment that just like transcends your understanding of the world. And then it's very common to like go back to our normal life and revert back to like our old way of seeing. And so like to go back to your point you made earlier, it's like we have to make this a practice. Like I realized in that moment, like these mountains are reminding me of the most important thing about, like of something that really is meaningful and changes the way that I approach my life and my everyday existence and where I'm placing my attention. And so I can't leave. I can't just let this be a one-off thing. Like I need to find a way to make contact with nature every day.
oh, God, you said so many there's, like, so many nuggets there that I'm trying to, like, remember.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, like, I think the part about too, like, not diminishing it's not like you can go look at a mountain and just, like, all your problems go away because that's not what we're saying at all. But yeah, it's like having that, like, quick, like, perspective shift, and, I'll share about my story here in a minute too, but I just another piece that you said is, you can't someone can't just say, like, "It's gonna be okay," right? And you're like,
Oh
"Okay."
God.
It's like
The worst thing you could do.
these
Want to make it
experiences
worse.
right? Or even or like all the talk therapy, all the, ways that we go about, like, healing usually. Um, I just think, like, it's like, go out and have an experience with God, like, with
Yeah.
nature, with the world around you, and it and just being open to what medicine that might hold for you, because it's accessible to everyone. It's free, like, right? Like, I just, there's just a lot of empowerment there, right? Like, we can go and put our hands on the dirt and feel something, and maybe not. Like, everyone's experience is gonna be different. But I guess what I'll say for me is, I had an experience of dark awe watching my husband die, where it was both, horrifying, extremely traumatic, and also awe-inspiring at the same time. Because, and we talk about this on the workshop, so I won't go into this too much, but it's just trauma and awe by definition both reorient your understanding of life because they're experiences that are so seismic. And so, watching Ian die absolutely changed my entire perception of life. It brought me into the inquiry of the afterlife. It made me question, it opened the doorways into spirituality. And it also made me feel so much more incredibly grateful for my body, my pulse, my heartbeat, my ability to eat my food and swallow it, to stand up and cuddle with my kids, right? Because we take that for granted again in our disconnected, fast-paced moving life. So that was an experience of dark awe. And again, dark awe is not my term. That is Decker Keltner's term as well. But then I had a similar experience of awe in a meadow after Ian died. After, 3 months after he died, I came back home from Hawaii where he passed away to Colorado. And I was like just so gutted and feeling like, how am I going to rebuild an entire life without him in it? And I went into a meadow and I up in the mountains, and there were birds chirping and the breeze was going by, and it was just so quiet and still. And off in the distance was this beautiful mountain peak, and I just had this feeling of like, exactly as you said, like I'm so small, and small in like a really good way. Like there's something bigger. There's a bigger narrative at play here. I'm gonna be okay. Like I like really, I was like, I don't know how I know this, but I just like feel like it's all gonna be okay because this isn't the end of my story. Or maybe it's the end of this chapter, but it's just one small chapter in my greater story. And how is this, if I was like the heroine here, like where is this taking me? Where is it guiding me next? Who am I becoming because of this? And so in both of our experiences, we had the experience of awe, which helped dissolve our ego self, this and the small self, so that we like all of those problems that seem so big and are so big, but they seem manageable when you feel held by something greater, connected to something greater. And that's um really like I believe as one of the most powerful effects of awe, on top of also feeling connected to one another and to humanity and feeling like you're not in this alone. And I wouldn't say I felt that so much in the meadow that day. I felt that more at like concerts or watching fireworks, or in fitness studios and feeling like, oh, okay, like I've got you, we've got each other. And just like that brother and sisterhood that you're not alone. We're connected to one another as well. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love for you to even speak more on that idea of the small self, because I think if someone were to hear that, like at first you could think that in some way that's diminishing us. And, especially when you think about, I think coming back to this concept of like how important it is to connect with nature, we kind of live in this like very human centric world where like
mhm.
humans are like, like proportionally, I'm almost picturing like some sort of diagram where like the human is like this big, huge piece. And then it's like all the millions of like trees and species and plants are just like little side characters. But it's like we have such a disproportionate perspective of like how we fit into all this. So
Yeah.
can you speak to like how, because okay, like when you've experienced something that's really challenging and could potentially like take you out, in a way, you need to feel powerful and strong and resilient. And so how
Yeah.
can the small self actually help with that?
Yeah, well, it's funny, Mary, because for a while I did feel like it was all on me. And there was a part of me that felt empowered by that. Because I like remember reading a quote early on that was like, it is what it is and it'll be what you make it. Like it was very much like, how can I manage this like with my mind by like recognizing that like it's not by making these like shifts in my language. But I guess in hindsight, I don't think that I was able to really do that without this experience of awe. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like it was like I read oh my God, now in hindsight that I'm seeing this, I read the book The Choice by Dr. Edith Eger, and it was her story of surviving Auschwitz. And she said that, freedom doesn't exist outside us, it's freedom is an inner state. And she talks about how she actually felt more free when she was inside the concentration camp. But after, it was her victimhood that trapped her, even though she was free, right? And so she talks
wow.
about how like freedom is like this mental state, and it's survivors ask why me. I'm sorry, victims ask why me, survivors ask what now. And as long as you have the choice, you really have the freedom to do anything. And so anyways, the reason I'm like this is like I'm having an epiphany moment here, that was moral beauty. Right?
Mhm.
Which is one of Dacher Keltner's Seven Wonders. That's another story of awe that like helped me that shifted my thinking about my own situation.
Yeah.
But going back to the small self, yeah, when the small self gets quiet, it's not that it goes offline, it's just that the ruminating and the worrying about the future or being stuck in the past it just goes offline for a little bit, and it gives you that sense of of relief, right? So that you can, I think, we've talked a lot about freeze response and our nervous system. It's like that, I'm going to be okay,
Yeah.
right? And to keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally feel that sense of like I'm going to be okay. And even the way you said that, like that, like, because it's like a felt sense of I'm
Mhm.
going to be okay. It's not like you're going to be okay. Don't worry. It's
Yeah.
like really feeling into that. And I think about that with like these moments in nature when, for me, it's like that's such a big thing of like going outside and connecting with nature is I feel that settling in my nervous system. That's that felt sense of like,
Mhm.
I'm going to be okay. And also, I'm not alone in this,
Mhm.
like part of, I think, connecting into that small self and recognizing that you're part of something so much greater. It's that you don't have to carry all of it on your own.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, there was this video that went viral a few years ago and people kept sharing it and it was driving me crazy because the woman is saying, no one is going to save you. It's like one of those like motivational talk things. No one's going to save you. And the whole message is that like, you gotta, go after it for yourself and go get what you want. And I
Yeah.
just felt like, that was the belief system that
Yeah.
kept me feeling so alone and isolated. And like, I get the message behind it. That's just
Yeah.
like take personal responsibility and all these different things. But my experiences with healing and recovery have been completely opposite of that. It's
Mhm.
actually been recognizing that, like, I have felt my whole life that, you know, I if I have something quote unquote wrong with me, I should feel ashamed and not show anyone and hide. And, that
Yeah.
disconnects me from other people. But actually, like, people are there to save you. And I love Mary Oliver talks about how nature saves her daily. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing. It's like if you feel so disconnected from other people that you don't feel like the people in your life are there to save you, like a lot of people don't have really supportive families
Mhm.
that can come step in when times get really harder. They might not have those friends, but like that connection with nature, it's like
Yeah.
like we can feel into that sense of belonging. And I actually do believe that there are people that, are going to be there to want to help us all the time because recovery taught me that. It like
Yeah.
made me unlearn that idea that I'm just going to be met with like shame and criticism. I met some of the most compassionate, generous people who never asked anything in return from me that were, and I think that that's what awe has really showed me through these
Mhm.
experiences of moral beauty, like the incredible generosity of people who show up vulnerably, who take time out of their day to meet
Mhm.
in the rooms of recovery and will say, is anyone new that needs a sponsor? And they're basically saying, I will come and mentor you for free. I will show you that you're not alone. I will walk you through this program.
Wow.
That was so groundbreaking for me. And, that's just one example of like talking about humans helping other humans. But, through these things that we've talked about, like there's so many ways to access this feeling of like deep interconnection and
Yeah.
belonging and like you're part of something bigger than yourself and you're not just this like individual human trying to go, find their way
Yeah.
through the world.
I mean, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think like the bottom one is like shelter and like safety. And then the next one is like connection and belonging. Like we all need
Mhm.
that. And I think that that whole, like you said, that motivational video of like, you just got to like suck it up and do it your own. Like, yeah, like there is like, I do believe that we like are in co-creation with our reality and like it is what it is and it'll be what you make it. But if we don't have like that relief, right? Like I really believed that I had to carry it alone for like a really long time. And until I had that
Mhm.
experience of awe, and even now, like in my priestessing work that I do, like I've learned about the Great Mother as an archetype and how even if you didn't have a biological mother who could hold you, you always have the Great Mother and the safety of her loving arms. And she's literally carrying us every single day, not asking for anything in return, but she's there for us. And can you just lie down on the grass and feel her love and her warmth and her holding all the time? I mean, that's brought me so much comfort, especially in times where it's like the hardest part about losing a spouse is like the one person you want to be there for you to like hold you during one of the hardest times of your life isn't. And
Mhm.
I tried to find that in another man and I've dated and those relationships have failed. So I really had to cultivate that sense of like holding for myself, like through and it like nature has been a huge part of that, like you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that belongs feeling that like, yes, we can do so much on our own and like we have a limit. Like we need one another. And we're seeing that happen the we're seeing the breaks in that mindset right now of this like highly individualistic, I've got me mentality. Like it's not like we're just the whole world, our world is like falling apart. We need one another. So, yeah.
Exactly. And what I was thinking, like when you were sharing about like that initial period where it was like you were just working so hard and like needing to hit the numbers and run your business. I'm thinking like, and I can't speak to your experience, but the state that you were in, like feeling like suddenly you have to handle this all on your own.
Mhm.
It's like
Mhm.
that is that mentality that just lets us be driven by so much like stress and
Yeah.
fear. And at a
Yeah.
surface level, we might be achieving a lot. I mean, that's the really
Totally. That's what's
unfortunate thing is
crazy.
that our culture rewards it. It's like,
Yes.
oh my gosh, they've sacrificed everything. They spend 24 hours a day working and they're so rich and they've got like all this stuff. And we're like,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I
Yeah.
think I talk about this a lot with addiction. It's like we like glorify work addiction in a lot of ways. It's
Totally.
like one of the most rewarded addictions, but it doesn't change the fact that underlying that, just like any substance addiction, that person is like desperately, they're in a very like not controlled way striving for something that's having negative consequences in
Oh my
other
God.
areas of their life. But it's like, so
It's so true,
anyway,
Mary. Like, I just really quick, I just want to name that because I know we're getting to like an hour and I want to respect everyone's time. But yeah, like when I was crushing it I was like totally in like dissociated in survival mode, like hitting all these numbers, doing all these things. Like I was getting so much accolades for that, right? And you know what
yeah.
society doesn't reward? Disappearing to go heal and to be with your grief and talking about like grieving years beyond. Like I've had to go through like an ego death at the same,
Hmm.
since January of this year to go back and do this soul retrieval work where I've had to really slow down and not be as visible in my community or launching as many programs. I haven't been making as much money, but I'm like, I don't care because I have to do this work. I have to process this pain. But it's, then you get a lot of people being like, but are you really still stuck on the grief? Like, are you like our society is so backwards, and it's like
Yeah.
I think it's really important for us to be having these conversations because it's like the inner work isn't glamorous. You're not gonna be validated for it all of the time, but in the end, like it's being connected to your heart and being able to fully feel and really being present for, like you said, like this human experience that is just so quick, like that's to me, that's what That's what matters, not like my Instagram following, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a big point too that you just made about like, in those early years, it's like you were, I'm sure to everyone around you, it's like, wow, she's so strong and she's so, and even like starting this conversation, like when we first connected, I mentioned that like you had this like spark in you. Well, what would that mean? Like now that I've said that, like it's like sometimes we have to be willing to also not be that person, like
Right.
to actually be the person who's like, I know it's been set to actually be the person who's like falling apart because that's what's coming up right now. And like,
Yeah,
and to show people that that's what grief looks like too,
too.
like,
Totally.
I think and this is a whole other conversation. I won't get into it, but
You're on
you
fire.
mentioned like earlier about how like we don't really like as a culture, I've heard it referred to as like a grief denying culture. Like
Mhm.
we don't know how to relate to grief. It's uncomfortable. We don't talk about it. And so like sometimes it's so like helpful to hear someone like you who's brave enough to be like, I'm experiencing this death 7 years later, and
Yeah,
it's, like, making me feel like a complete death of myself, and, like, maybe I'm not gonna be showing up the way that I used to be, and, like,
yeah.
this is what like, to me, that's, like, the most courageous thing you can do is just to allow people to see you, like, in all of it,
Yeah,
so
talk about death of the party girl, like, that's
yeah,
like,
right?
it's like yeah, and, and it like, yes and no, like, there can be it's like the death of the party girl, but in a whole it's just like she's just more integrated. Like, the joy and the bliss
Totally.
and the love is still all there, but it's coming from a different place. It's not coming from a place of needing to perform or to prove, right? It's coming just from being embodied and being grateful to be here.
Exactly. It's funny with the death of the party girl because I was just talking to someone the other day who was like, "I just can't picture you, like, partying, like, doing cocaine." Because like, my new life, I'm like, no, I go to bed at, like, 9 at the latest. So it's, like, kind of comical, but I was like, in so many ways, the party girl in me is more alive than ever. Like, I'm, like,
Yes!
springing out of bed. We were just talking before this about, like, going out with headlamps on to like stargaze and then watch the sunrise. And it's like all that like high energy fun, like the part that I was so attached to, it's like that didn't die. It just
Yeah.
took new form.
Yes. Which is what death is, right? Death is just about
Totally.
transmutation so that something
Yes.
new can be born. It's not like something just disappears. It's just, yeah. Oh my God, we could talk forever. So we also, before we sign off, Mary and I are hosting an epic retreat in Madeira, Portugal, later this fall. And the reason why we landed on this spot in particular is like we literally, I think we had like 7 different spots in mind. And, Mary's been to many of them, so she knows. And we thought, if we want to do a retreat around awe and magic where people can like really wake up to the wonder that's just like woven into this amazing, beautiful life, like where would that be? And Madeira came to us because it just has the combination of these breathtaking cliffs, amazing hikes against the ocean, all of the water life beneath, the whales, dolphin watching. Mary, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah,
Like the
absolutely.
pools?
Yeah, it's just that full combination of like when we were talking about there's so many different ways to access awe. I think about like
Yeah.
the diversity of landscapes there,
Mhm.
like these volcanic islands, like just kind of contemplating how it all came to be. And, you know, I was recently whale watching in Mexico in December, and it was like just seeing the tip of their tail come out of the ocean. It's like it cracks your mind open to like this whole world
Under the
that
sea.
exists underneath there. And like talk about ancient history and the
Yeah.
human instinct, you know? And so
Yeah.
we've kind of created these experiences through nature, through sound healing, through coming together. Like we spoke about the value of being with other people who are,
Mm.
not necessarily like the friends you're normally going to dinner parties with every night or the family that's known you your entire life, but like people who see the world differently and
Yeah.
are, also on this journey of like exploration and trying to get to know themselves better. And so I think that's been something about retreats that I think I have some of my closest friends in the world are people that I met through these experiences. And I tend to travel solo to them like for that reason. Like it's like
Yeah.
I purposely go. I think it's great to go with a friend, but I love going on my own too because it's like I can't wait to see who I meet, you
Yeah,
know?
I agree. That's how my Egypt trip was, just like connecting with total strangers. It's so much fun. Um,
Totally.
so we'd love to invite you into this retreat if that feels like something that's aligned for you. If you're looking for kind of that pattern disrupt, peak experience, introduction into awe, or maybe you've had experiences of awe and you just want more. Like, I don't know how you're not going to experience awe on this trip. Community and time to just reconnect to yourself and yeah, like access all of these amazing feelings that we think we need that are like outside of ourselves but are actually like right here, right? Like cultivating them from the inside out. So um we did come up with a little promo code. It's POD 300 for $300 off the retreat. It's about like halfway sold out right now, but we're welcoming in more soul aligned members to come join us. So, Mary, is there anything else that you have to add?
I think we covered a lot. I know we could go on for hours
Oh,
and
I
hours,
know.
but I'm so glad. Yeah, thank you so much for everyone who listened. And if anything came up for you, I always like to say, like at the end of the podcast, like please reach out by Instagram or email or whatever that is, and share what's coming up for you. If you have questions about the retreat, want to hop on a call, we'd love to connect more with you.
Awesome. Great. Yes, hit us up, and we hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and we'll catch you in another one. Bye.